Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 7 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022 in Cafeteria B of Westfield High School, 550 Dorian Road, Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of this meeting is to transact the regular business of the Board and to transact any other business to come properly before the Board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Thursday, April 28th, 2022, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education, located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, the Town Clerk of Westfield, Tap Into Westfield, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. Dana, can I have a roll call?
Sahar Aziz. Here. Rob Bonaccio.
Here.
Mike Beelan.
Here.
Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Layla Morelli. Here. Sonal Patel.
Here.
Amy Root.
Here.
Kristen Sonic-Schmeltz.
Here.
Mary Wickens.
Here.
Thank you. Layla, will you lead us in flag salute? Thank you. I believe we only have two announcements tonight. Sahar?
Okay. The Westfield High School Theater Guild is hosting its popular Mayhem event showcasing student artistic talent this Saturday, May 7th at 7:30 p.m. in the high school auditorium. Tickets are $10 and are sold at the door. And I also just want to recognize that this is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month.
Thank you, Sahar. The next meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May 17th in Cafeteria B at Westfield High School. The meeting will also be live streamed via the district YouTube channel, which viewers can access via the Board tab on the district website. The complete agenda will be available on Friday, May 13th, also on the Board tab. We look forward to recognizing our talented student musicians at that meeting. And with that, I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Galligan. This week is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I do want to take the opportunity to thank all of our dedicated educators for all that they do on behalf of our students. I also want to thank the Rotary Club of Westfield for its annual recognition of an outstanding teacher at the elementary level. Last Thursday, I had the pleasure of surprising fifth grade teacher, Mr. Matthew Cognetti, in his classroom with the news that he had been selected as this year's recipient of the Rotary's Charles Philhauer Fellowship Award. He was visibly touched by the recognition, and his students were thrilled. Matt is a graduate of the Westfield Public Schools and began teaching in the district in 2001. 1 year in fourth grade at Washington before moving down the hall to fifth grade, where his enthusiasm, depth of knowledge, and professionalism has guided his teaching ever since. Matt also serves as an instructional technology support teacher, helping his colleagues to implement technology in their classrooms. I will leave it to Dr. Perry. Dr. Perry, there you go. I will leave it to Dr. Perry to speak to Mr. Cognetti's many contributions to Washington School and the district, but on behalf of the entire Westfield Public School community, I want to congratulate Matt on his well-deserved recognition.
So, Matt, forget about what I told you. It's really scary to be up here in front of all these people. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the Board of Education and the Rotary Club and Dr. Gonzalez for spending the time and effort to celebrate such an outstanding educator as Matt Cognetti. You may or may not know that Matt comes from a large family. Everyone in the front 6 tables is a Cognetti sibling. And if you don't know, this is Laura Cognetti and Charlotte Cognetti and Christopher Cognetti. And, that's it for now. So in recent years, Laura has won several different awards from her company. that have included, for some excellent accomplishments of her own, that included a trip to Hawaii and a trip to Jackson Hole, where she was able to take her husband along with her. So I wish I could tell you, Laura, that you're going to Tahiti, but you're stuck with me in my comments instead. I also knew exactly what Matt was going to wear tonight. I knew this because he was selected by the staff as the faculty member to represent us in Washington, D.C. at the ceremony hosted by the Secretary of Education when Washington School was awarded the National Blue Ribbon School of Excellence, and that's exactly what he wore. And the funny thing is that we wore the same tie, but I decided tonight it was good if we both had these ties. So this is Dr. Gonzalez's magic tie clip. It was Take Your Child to Work Day when Dr. Gonzalez surprised Matt in his class, and he came in and started chatting with Matt, who noticed the tie clip. And it may be hard to see, but it spells out Cognetti. So that's when Matt knew the jig was up. And it was very cool that Christopher and Charlotte were there when Dr. G visited. But that's a magic. Only superintendents have magic tie clips like that. So this is also the first time that Dr. Gonzalez is involved in the Philhauer Award. And you're the first teacher that he's ever presented this to. And this is very lucky because I don't have to remind you that everyone remembers the first time that you ride your bicycle, and he's always going to remember that you were his first. Matt received a number of nominations from parents, students, and colleagues. Letters came from parents of students with special needs and from parents in the Gifted and Talented program, all students that Matt has had. One student remarked, "My mom told me about this award, and I thought there is only one teacher I could think of for this opportunity. Mr. Cognetti has always been making sure that I get the right education. Anytime he notices a problem that I am having, personal or school-related, he is always trying to help me understand or solve the problem." Here's the part that I really love. "Sometimes when I really don't understand something, I feel like I ask too many questions and it might have annoyed other teachers or made them get frustrated. But with Mr. Cognetti, I feel like he will try to help in any way he can to try and make me understand it more." Can't get a bigger compliment than that. This was from another student. "Mr. Cognetti always tells us stories that help us." You might want to cover your ears here, Christopher. Once he told us a story about how his son's backpack was cluttered with random stuff. So we stopped putting a lot of stuff in our backpacks until we cleaned it out. There were comments from teachers, too. Here's one. "Mr. Cognetti was asked to be my mentor when I was hired as a new teacher at Washington School. He expertly guided me through evaluations from administrators, assisted me in editing and revising my lessons, and helped me more effectively deliver my instruction. However, the thing that sticks with me the most is how he listened. He listened to me cry, complain, and ask a million questions. He was honest in the most kind way and always made me feel supported. His mentorship and guidance has truly helped shape me as a teacher. For that, I will be forever grateful." And Kerry, I just want to say that I'm sorry I made you cry. Another teacher mentioned that Matt finds the good in everyone. He has a diplomatic approach and finds solutions that make everyone happy. And a third, "I am inspired by him every day, not only by the way he leads his classroom, but how he enriches the lives of others." Once a week, Matt invites students to come in early to review math concepts and receive support on confusing topics. And once a week, he meets during his lunch hour with a group of students who choose to learn about some more sophisticated concepts in math. One parent remarked, "When I asked my daughter some of the things she likes about her teacher, she noted how special it is that he is willing to give up his lunch hour and to come in early for these sessions." Matt is the consistent and driving force behind the 15-year tradition of taking fifth graders on an overnight to an environmental education center. Here, the students connect what they are learning about in the classroom, like the restoration of the Great Lakes, to the real world, like exploring the water quality of Fairview Lake. For 20 years, Matt has his fifth graders write a letter to themselves in the future. Just weeks before their graduation from high school, he mails these letters to his former pupils. He says, "It's a letter to you, from you, only to be read by you. The more you write, the more you'll thank your past self in the future." And this part I wasn't going to say unless there was a need to say it, and I can see there's a need to say it, that my 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Ball, had us write letters to ourselves when I was in her class. I still remember receiving mine the week I graduated high school. So yes, Matt is really just 18 years old right now, but that's a nice, what goes around comes around. Some of you may remember the day last school year when the district's internet went down while half of our students were home on Google Meet. I wandered into Matt's room to discover that his pupils that were at home were still on the screen, and it was as if nothing was going on and no one knew that the internet was down. Matt figured out how to use the personal hotspot on his phone to create an internet connection and made lemonade out of lemons, and it was just a matter of minutes before everyone in the school was doing the same thing. I could go on and on about the things that Matt does for our school, such as the 5th grade PTO Scholarship Award to a graduating Westfield High School alumnus, or his dancing prowess in the Washington School Show or in the charity volleyball game, his help making the lunch hour fun for everyone outside, his work on the school improvement team, his assistance at game night and the Somerset Patriot game, the Wax Museum, Word of the Day, and all things Disney and Penn State. But I won't. When people speak about the nobility of the teaching profession, they are talking about teachers like Matt Cognetti. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and students, allow me to introduce to you Matt Cognetti.
Thank you. I would like to thank the Rotary Club for recognizing and honoring an educator in our town each year. I'd like to thank the Board of Education for having me here tonight. The fact that someone who sits on the board, I went through kindergarten through 12th grade, means so much to me. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Perry, for your kind words. To my wife, Laura, and my 2 children, thank you as well. My wife has been the biggest supporter, especially over the last 2 years, which has been an interesting time in education. She also makes sure I'm well fed every day. I'm the envy of the teacher's room with the lunches that she puts together. Last night, she also gave me a crash course on how to speak in front of adults, as this is not something I am used to. To my kids, it was so great that they were there, that it was Take Your Child to Work Day, and that they were there to see me receive the award. They're just really excited about the ice cream that's coming after the award, so they would like me to speak quickly. And to my parents, who are also here this evening, I remember being very nervous when I called home to tell them that I was switching my major to elementary education. But they have been nothing supportive then and continue to be supportive now of the change that I made. They must have realized I wanted to teach from a young age, so to help me prepare, they gave me 7 younger brothers and sisters, which in many ways were like my first students, and many of them are here tonight as well. One of the activities we do in class is something called Word of the Day, as Dr. Perry mentioned. Each day we focus on a different word and how to use it when we speak and write correctly. We learn the definition, draw a picture that helps us remember the word, and use it in a sentence. Some of the times the words focus on important life skills: to advocate for yourself and others, to be diligent, persistent, punctual, ambitious, tenacious, and optimistic. Each day, we put the word on the back bulletin board in a bright color so that we're reminded of them throughout the year. So far, we've learned about 130 years since the school year began. Last Friday, I looked at the wall for inspiration, a word that would describe how I feel. While there are a plethora of words to choose from, the one that kept coming to my mind was actually much simpler than any of the words we have learned, and that word is grateful. I am grateful to have grown up in a town that values education the way that Westfield does. Going to Tamaqua School, Edison, and then Westfield High School, I had so many phenomenal teachers that had such a tremendous impact on my life. As Dr. Perry mentioned, a week before I graduated, I did receive a letter in the mail. I was shocked that, at that age, you don't really get much mail. So I was a little surprised and confused as to who would write me a letter. And I opened it up to find that it was me, that I had written in 7th grade English class with Mrs. Ball. The fact that she would take the time to hold on to all those letters and then to mail them back to us really struck me. I knew in that moment that if I ever became a teacher, I was going to carry on that tradition. And I still do. Every June, I pull a box out of my closet, look for the envelope labeled with this year's graduating class, and send them their letters, along with a letter from me and a picture. I am also grateful to work with such an amazing team. Mr. Borja and Mrs. Sangemino are two phenomenal colleagues. We spend so much time coming up with ideas and lessons and discussing how we can better reach our students. We also just have fun. One of them is literally family, but the other is just like family to me. I am also grateful to work with my sister, Mrs. Borja. When my students hear that we didn't always get along growing up, they are shocked, but I think it is a great lesson for them as well. Your relationships with your siblings grow and get better. I'm also grateful to work at Washington. Every Washington parent knows that our school is filled from top to bottom with truly amazing individuals. Classroom teachers, resource teachers, special area teachers, our nurse, office staff, custodians, substitutes, and of course our principal, Dr. Perry. Everyone works so hard to make Washington a truly special place. I'm grateful to work with such amazing parents. The parents at Washington are always there to help out and support the teachers. From organizing fundraisers, to helping out at class parties, to working with teachers on how to best meet the needs of their child, they are always there to support us and to cheer us on. And of course, there is the Washington School Show. For 21 years, they have been attempting to teach me how to dance. I'm still a work in progress, but I think I have improved. I've got the grapevine down for the most part. I am grateful to have such a supportive principal in Dr. Perry. If anyone in our building needs something to help them in the classroom, he makes sure we get it. Most of us honestly don't know how he pulls it off. He is also there just to listen, give advice, and bounce ideas off of. We all know that his office door is always open. We all know that we can be creative, think outside the box, and take risks in the classroom. He is not just okay with this. He encourages it and provides an environment where we feel safe to do so. And then there is my class this year. I am again grateful to have a great group of students. Yes, you guys over there. They come in each morning with smiles on their faces, ready to learn and tackle any challenge I throw at them. With the word of the day, we start in September by focusing on just definitions and simple sentences using the words. But they quickly moved beyond this, where they now are at the point where they create a theme for their tests. They take all 15 words and write it about their family, or their sister, or Disney World if they really want to get on my good side, their pets, Squidward or Caillou. It is so much fun to read the stories and sentences they write. We also have amazing classroom discussions on a wide variety of topics. Just last Friday, we were discussing the one-child policy in social studies. One student said that when she was younger, she wanted to have 26 kids. 26. Even from a family as large as mine, that's a lot. I told her that I really didn't think it was practical, especially in today's world, but gave her an even better idea. Simply become a teacher. That way, you can have hundreds of kids. You get to see them grow up and flourish, fall, and help them find ways to pick themselves back up. It is so incredibly rewarding. Plus, you don't have to pay for their college education. When I was growing up, I was always told, find the job you love and never work a day in your life. I honestly thought it was just something that adults told to kids. It wasn't until I became a teacher that I truly understood the truth in that saying. Thank you all again for having me here tonight. In a district filled with such amazing educators, I truly feel honored. So thank you.
You're not done yet. This is a resolution by the Board of Education of Westfield, New Jersey to Matthew Cognetti, Rotary Club of Westfield 2022 Philhauer Fellow. Whereas Charles Philhauer distinguished himself as an outstanding educator during the 30 years of service as Westfield Superintendent of Schools from 1917 to 1947, helping establish Westfield as a premier school district in the state of New Jersey. And whereas the Rotary Club of Westfield has established a fellowship in memory of Charles Philhauer, co-founder and past president of the Rotary Club. And whereas this memorial is a fitting tribute to the importance of teaching in the elementary grades and the nobility of the teaching profession. And whereas Matthew Cognetti, a fifth grade teacher and instructional technology support teacher at Washington Elementary School, who has been serving the Westfield elementary students since 2001, has been awarded the 30th annual Philhauer Fellowship for outstanding teaching, interest in children, and continued pursuit of professional growth. And whereas Matthew Cognetti is commended for his contagious dedication to students and colleagues, his even-keeled and knowledgeable approach, his calm and caring demeanor, and his commitment to the students, staff, and families of the Westfield Public Schools, now therefore be it resolved that this Board of Education publicly express its appreciation to the Rotary Club for establishing this award, and that this Board of Education sincerely congratulates Matthew Cognetti for being named the 2022 Charles Philhauer Fellow, a significant honor and a notable accomplishment. And that this resolution be presented to Matthew Cognetti on May 3rd, 2022, and that a copy of this formal resolution become part of the permanent records of this Board of Education. Congratulations, Matt. We'll now pause for a brief moment. So Matt's family can congratulate him, and anybody who doesn't wish to stay can head to the doors.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Beautiful speech.
Oh, Emmy. Hey, Mr. Warhawk.
Help with the mics.
All right, do you have all your stuff? Nope, stop.
All right. Thanks for bearing with us through this short break. Dr. Gonzalez, do we have a district administration report this week?
Actually, no report this week.
Okay. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Amy for a SIP report.
Okay, well, actually, SIP has not had a meeting since last Tuesday night, so I don't have an official report. Our next curriculum instruction and program meeting, committee meeting, is May 20th. And tonight on the agenda, we have 2 curriculum items that we'll be voting on. We're asking for approval for second reading of revised curricula for an interdisciplinary course at the high school entitled Women's Studies, and 2 gifted studies curricula in grade 5, independent study and research methods. And the second curriculum item is to approve district field trip for Washington Elementary School to go to Long Branch, New Jersey. So those are the curriculum items that are up for voting later on the agenda.
All right, thank you, Amy. Mike, do we have a facilities report tonight?
No, we haven't met since last week. We have a meeting, I believe, coming up later this week. I have to check the calendar, but no report this evening.
Thank you, Mike. Amy, finance?
Yep. Finance Committee met last Wednesday, had a pretty thorough discussion. We were visited by 2 two representatives from our insurance brokers who walked the finance committee through sort of the process of what goes on as we go out for review for bids for insurance premiums. And it's a pretty thorough process. I think it was pretty impressive to hear, what goes on and what kinds of factors are being looked at, what might be happening with the premiums, what would be what might be taken into account if anything needed to change. Nothing on the agenda tonight for voting. Nothing is changing at this point. It's all still under review, but it was just a really good overview, I think, for new and more seasoned board members as well, to be able to hear that process. We did also talk about, the food service contract with Chartwell's. Unfortunately, as with many things, prices are going to be going up a little bit for next year. We also talked about subscription busing, which is what we do, sometimes refer to it as courtesy busing. When we have available seats on bus routes, people can pay for their child to join on that bus route. So that's something that Dana's office handles, the business office handles. We don't recoup all of our costs from that, but that will go up a little bit next year as well. Has been $1,000. It'll probably go to $1,100 next year. And then the final thing that came out of our meeting that we wanted to make sure we address tonight is that Brendan has talked about the thorough policy audit that has been going on for several months. Some of the one of the policies that we were talking about in finance has to do with student transportation. And in reviewing what the policy says and what our practice is, it turns out that we have been providing courtesy busing for certain programs that are not required to be given courtesy busing. And given the year that we've had with the scarcity of finding buses at all and the costs that are going through the roof on that, we will not be changing the policy, but we'll be changing the application of the policy. And people that may have come to expect courtesy busing for certain programs may not be receiving free busing for those programs going forward. Specifically, that would pertain to kindergarten students that would be attending Lincoln School from other zones throughout the town, gifted and talented students, and some English language learner students as well. Is that right, Dana? Did I characterize that all right? Okay. So although, again, we're not voting on changing anything tonight, it does represent a change in interpretation of the policy that is not changing. So we wanted to make sure that we got that out tonight. We made sure that board members hear that in case you get questions from anyone in the district. We wanted to make sure you knew about that. Anything else that we talked about in finance? No, those are the main items. Okay. And then tonight on the finance agenda, there are 6 items that we'll be voting on. A resolution for an agreement for our independent registered municipal advisor of record. Again, the subscription busing for next year, increasing the amount to $1,100 per year. Non-resident tuition rates for next year. I'm missing one. There we go. Oh, some travel expenses for board members, administrators, and teachers. 2 donations that I'll be pleased to call out when we get to that point on the agenda, and approving out-of-district placements for extended school year for students whose IEPs and child study teams say that they are qualified for. So those are the 6 items coming up on the finance agenda tonight.
Amy, just want to thank Brown & Brown, our insurance broker, for the level of detail they provided us and how much work they've gone into bid and rebid and pit one bid against the other to try and get us the lowest possible health insurance increase for next year. It's still an increase, but it's it could have been significantly worse had we gone with the initial round of bids that came in.
Yeah, it's good to know we have them working for us. They're a good group. Yep, exactly. Any?
Pertaining to Amy's report?
Okay, thanks. Just a couple questions. The first is, during the finance committee, was there any discussion about the expected cost of insurance, or was it more just a discussion for next year? I know we've done the budget, but was there any discussion that it might be lower or higher, or was it more just about process?
Mostly about sure. It was mostly about the process. That was the largest part of the conversation, I would say. And comparing too, that if it comes to a change in, for instance, although we self-insure our health plan, we have sort of a name brand insurer whose card is in the wallets and purses of people who carry the insurance. And so whose name is on that card may affect which doctors they are able to see, whether they're in network or out of network. And Brown and Brown spent time, showing how if you compare this to that, different plans, how much coverage you have of doctors being in network or out of network, and then talking about the kind of work they would do with the associations and with the people who work for the district in streamlining that process if a change were to be necessary going forward. So much more conversation about process. I don't think the rates are
But, I mean, we-
fixed yet.
We're self-insured, so
Right.
we don't have premiums per se. But we do have insurance, reinsurance or stop-loss insurance for each individual as well as for the district as a whole. So part of the negotiations that they're doing with the various, Horizon is currently our third-party administrator. We're looking at possibly moving that to a different provider. And part of that would be tied into what our maximum liability would be and when the stop-loss insurance kicks in. So it's dollars as well as process that we were talking about. However, a lot of what we're going to spend is dependent on our employees and how healthy they are. So there's dollars as far as maximums and when insurance kicks in and that kind of thing, but there's no set dollar amount that we would spend.
Okay. And then the related, it looks like it's under SIP, the approval of the 2 courses and then the field trip? Is that right?
That's curriculum, yep.
Yeah, I just have a question mainly for this kind of senior board members, is trying to understand, can you guys just explain again how the field trips are organized and funded? Because I noticed, for example, it was a field trip just for Washington as opposed to all the elementary schools, and I know this was a question that I had even before I was on the board, is how field trips are funded and organized.
Well, they're organized by teachers and administrators at a given school for reasons that can dovetail in with curriculum items, typically. And typically, the costs for a field trip are borne by students, families whose students are going on that field trip. So we're not paying as a district for one school to have a field trip and for another school not to have a field trip. It's the families whose children are going on that trip who would be paying the cost of that trip.
Okay.
There can be sometimes an issue of equitability. Is that your concern?
Yeah, I'm just curious, for example, if a parent at Tamaulipas says, oh, that's a great field trip, I wish my kids could go on that field trip, what is it that would allow Tamaulipas to also send kids, maybe not on the same day, the same field trip, but to do a similar field trip to make sure that all the students in the various elementary schools get these, because this sounds like an exciting, I mean, I support it, it's fantastic. You get to go to the beach and be a seashore scientist, but I'm just trying to understand how that happens at every elementary school in terms of organization and in terms of funding. So you've answered the funding question, but is it up to employees of the district and therefore within the jurisdiction of the board, or is it up to, for example, the PTOs, and then it's really more of a somewhat quasi kind of private public?
For it to be a field trip, there would have to be a faculty sponsor, whether it be a classroom teacher or a music teacher or whoever. Yeah, there's an application process, there's an approval process. There has to be some nexus to curriculum in some capacity.
Okay.
We can't say we're going to Six Flags because we want to go to Six Flags. The physics class in high school gets to go to Six Flags because they do
Physics
scientific
day.
experiments.
They do
on
physics day, yeah.
The only day you're allowed to bring loose objects on roller coasters.
There used to be too, Sahar, before COVID, like across grade level field trips. It might have been, not brought back to its full organization yet, but there
Okay.
used to be trips that, all third graders went on or all
Right.
fourth graders went on.
Like Sandy
And-
Hook for fifth
like
grade,
Sandy Hook for fifth
Philadelphia
grade.
for fourth grade.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the teachers, like Brennan said, fill something out to
Okay.
apply for those.
All right, I just wanted to raise, just to make sure that, all the kids in every elementary school, or if it's a middle school, that we just are cognizant of the equity, so that we don't have parents who, may rightfully say, hey, I want my kid to also do that. But, okay, thanks
Yeah.
for the
And we
explanation.
do get that complaint every year.
Well,
It's a
yeah.
fair complaint, I think.
it is.
Sure. And I will tell you that the PTC, the Parent Teacher Council, which meets once a month, which has representatives from all of the schools, they share those kinds of ideas of what's happening at their school. The presidents of the PTOs meet as well, and they do that very thing. Sometimes they'll say, hey, what is that? We want to know more about that. How does that work at your school? And then they may raise it with the principal at their school and say, this other elementary school's doing it. Have we thought about it? Could it work? What could we do to help make it work? That kind of thing.
So is it up to the principal? Is that kind of where the buck stops in terms of deciding whether the field trip will go through?
I would say it's usually the principal who signs off on the form, so I would think so. Don't you think, Dr. Gonzalez? Who would be the principal who would be sort of the final determiner of a field trip for a
I
given
think
school?
based upon what I've heard, I mean, certainly the principal would have to sign off if there's a standard form that we're using. I think with all the connections and alignment to standards and curriculum, but I think it sounds like there was something, whether it be formal or not, that used to cut across through the curriculum and sort of supersede that. I would have to, dig a little deeper to see where that originated and where it left off, to see how to revive it or just reconstruct it. So it's definitely something I could look into.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just had a question. For the subscription busing, so just so that I understand, if there are available seats on the routes that we're providing to the schools, we could take funding if someone wanted to opt to have their child put on those routes. Is that advertised?
It's on our website. I mean, I don't know that I would say it's advertised, but, because we don't have,
A ton of.
yeah, right.
I'm just thinking like for the, parents who work, they would be very willing if it was known, just in terms of, depending upon your proximity to the school or that type of thing.
I will say that most of our buses where we have space, they're filled. So
Yeah.
people do know. But, yeah, I don't know that I'd call it advertised.
And we'll have to have a lottery system too, if we end up getting more
Right.
requests than demand. But I agree with
Correct.
you. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with that.
For the people that will not get bused, based on the report that Amy gave, they will be notified that subscription busing may be available on a space available basis.
Any other questions or comments for Amy on finance?
Brendan, I just had one general, more a curiosity question. I looked at the out-of-district tuitions, and I just was curious, why is the middle school tuition slightly higher than the
I asked the
than
same
the high
question.
school?
So that is calculated by our budget system, and I would gather that our middle school teachers are more senior than our high school teachers this year, and therefore our cost at the middle school level is higher than our cost at the high school level.
It's a true cost allocation, Mike.
Okay, I just was
Yeah.
curious, because usually you see it the opposite, that's all.
I had the same comment when we were reviewing the budget, reviewing the agenda last week.
That usually doesn't happen, but
All right, thank you, Amy. There is no long-range planning, policy, or technology reports for tonight. We do have several policies on the agenda for tonight for second reading. We approved them at our board meeting last week. So, sorry, two meetings ago, not last.
Brennan, could I just add to
Absolutely.
that? Since
Absolutely.
we're on the topic of policies, we will include it in our upcoming community newsletter. But I do want to, say for the public in attendance and those watching that we have revised our policy portal, public policy portal, to make it a little easier to access as well as search our policy database. So when you click on the policy link on our website, you'll notice it provides a different interface than you may have seen before. So I do want to highlight that for members of the public.
Yeah, actually, I just clicked on it on schoolboard.net and it redirects to Strauss Esme as well. So all the links are active. So if you had an old bookmark, it should redirect. All right. With that, there are no other committee reports tonight because the last four are me. We are The negotiations committee is meeting tomorrow with our custodial association, and we will begin on the 24th with our paraprofessional association. With that, if there's no other questions or comments from the board on committee reports, I'll open up. During this portion of the meeting, district residents and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on agenda action items only. The board requests that individuals state their name and address for the record, the specific action items they're commenting on, and asks that all remarks be directed to the board president or designee, not to individual members or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey, and the board bears no responsibility nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, the superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to all items raised during this public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant's statement. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker's statement will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes in duration. If anybody would like to address the board tonight on agenda action items, please come to the podium. Give me 1 second to get the timer going. Thank you. All right, whenever you're ready, Mr. George.
Okay. Kyle George, Short Hills Court Test. Whoa.
Oh.
Could you reset the timer?
Absolutely.
Thanks. Kyle George, Short Hills Court. I'd like to talk about the governance and personnel action items. For governance, policy 9560, administration of school surveys. For personnel, the salaries of certain administrators and the terminations of 17 people. The surveys policy does not go far enough to protect students. The policy says that the results of the surveys can be turned over to the state with no mention of anonymization of data. Under no circumstances should you be turning over student survey data to the state. And as we've seen with the recent Hanover Research Survey, the district does not respect existing parental opt-out rights. There needs to be meaningful disciplinary penalties for employees that don't respect opt-outs or other parental rights. Employees need to be given some PD on general respect of parental rights and PPRA so that there's a shared understanding across the whole district. Because existing policies were not followed, Hanover Research should be instructed to delete the data that it collected. Has that been done or considered? There are 25 administrators whose salaries are being voted on tonight. There are 5 to 10 administrators that I estimate aren't on tonight's list. These administrators' salaries and benefits combined make up a significant portion of the budget per capita, at least $5 million by my estimation. To understand the scale, there are, by my count, 752 other teachers, secretaries, paras, and custodians who are paid from the remaining salary and benefits budget. Now, about half of the administrative positions are essential, 1 principal, assistant principal per school, special needs program coordinators, etc., but others are not. We have at least 4 people whose primary job is to work on curriculum. How many people does one school district need to write curriculum when we largely copy the state or outside organizations? None of these administrative positions were touched as part of the layoffs. Now, to be very clear, I'm not suggesting that any of the essential administrator salaries are exorbitant or should be reduced. They seem quite reasonable given their scope of responsibility. However, when you talk about cutting people, surely there was at least some redundancy in the curriculum department, for example. One of the teachers up for termination on the action agenda is a music teacher at Tamaquas. I'm not zoned for Tamaquas, but I've seen a desperate email sent by the teacher to all of Tamaquas schools. Surely you've seen it too. He wrote about a list of rehired teachers on tonight's agenda and said, quote, "A woman who was hired in my department the year after me is on the list, even though she was initially riffed," end quote. Another music teacher retired apparently, yet this terminated teacher was not spared. In his email, he writes that he feels like he's being, quote, "discriminated against," end quote. Given the district's dire financial situation, I would caution the district to deeply reflect on any possible claims of discrimination and to make sure the termination aligns with policy. The optics of this certainly aren't good, especially considering that just today, Westfield Public Schools boasted on its Facebook page that the district was named one of the best communities for music education. I hope this termination does not result in the loss of that designation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. Do any other members of the public wish to address us on agenda items tonight? All right, seeing none, this first public comment session is closed. I ask the board to approve the minutes of the April 26, 2022 board meeting. Can I have a second? Thank you, Amy. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Now I ask the board to approve personnel items number 1 through 18. Can I have a second? Thank you, Layla. Any retirements tonight, Dr. Gonzalez? I don't believe any.
Not that I have.
All right. Dana?
Sahar Aziz,
Yes.
Robin Accio,
Yes.
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Layla Morelli,
Yes.
Sonal Patel,
Yes.
Amy Root,
Yes?
Kristen Sonic-Schmeltz,
Yes.
Mary Wickens.
Yes.
All right. Amy?
Sorry, would like the board to consider finance items 1 through 6. Could I have a second, please? Thank you, Kristen. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, board members have them in front of them, but I did want to call out on this one, item number 5, which is we would like to accept with tremendous gratitude 2 particular donations tonight. One from the ExxonMobil Educational Alliance Math and Science School Grant Program to enhance Edison Intermediate School's mathematics and science curricula in the amount of $500. And then also a donation from the high school PTSO, $5,000 to purchase furniture for the high school library, which I think is undergoing a renovation and becoming more of a media center. So we're very grateful, as we are at every meeting, for community groups and other philanthropic organizations that help provide the funds to make the difference on things, even in slightly better budget years than the one we're looking at. So we're tremendously grateful for that. Does anyone have any questions or comments about any of the other finance items? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just procedurally, should we be abstaining where our names are on for the conference, or is that not necessary?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
You can have a quorum. Got a lot of names on there.
There are line items on the
I think
on
you
the table.
can
There we go.
abstain on just yours.
Just your own
Yeah,
nine?
yeah.
Okay, good.
So I just wanted to praise whoever got us the grants, and especially ExxonMobil. I know it's only 500, but that matters. So whoever did that within the administration, teachers, PTO, thank you. That's the type of, I think, teamwork we need.
Agreed. Yeah. Thanks. Anyone else? No? Okay. Vote, Dana?
Sahar Aziz,
Yes, but abstain line item
You are
10.
4.
4.
Line 4.
Robin Accio,
Yes.
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes, but abstain from line 14 on, or which version? Are we looking at different versions of this? Whatever my name is attached to, abstain from that.
There's an attachment to item number 4 as part of the agenda, and there are 11 items.
Okay. Yeah, it also popped up on attachment 6.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
so line 7.
Okay. Let's see. So Sahara is line 4, Kristen is line 5, Brendan, you're 7,
Mm-hmm.
Layla is line 10, and Sonal is line 11. Okay. All right. So where are we?
Sonal was what, 10?
11.
Sonal's 11.
11. I'm
Layla
11.
is 10.
Okay.
Okay.
We were at Layla.
Yes.
Yes, except for I abstain from number 10.
Sonal,
Yes, and abstain from number 11.
Amy Root,
Yes to all of them. Thank you.
Kristen Sonic-Schmeltz,
Yes, and I abstain from number 5.
Mary Wickens.
Yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, those were specific lines of item number 4. So, item number 5 was to accept donations. So. We want that. No, it's okay. No, everybody was doing it. I'm just
Yeah.
clarifying. Because it's unusual. So, that's all. So, okay, great, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Amy. I ask the board to approve policy item number 1. Can I have a second? Thank you, Sonal. This is approved for second reading. Policies 2415.05, student surveys, analysis, evaluations, examinations, testing, and/or treatment. 2431.8, varsity letters for interscholastic extracurricular activities. 2460.30, additional compensatory special education and related services. 2468, independent educational evaluations. 2622, and the regulations attached for student assessments. 5116, and the regulations for education of homeless children, and 9560, the administration of school surveys. Any questions or comments?
I just want to thank Dr. Gonzalez and his senior staff for being responsive to the comments that were made last time about the student survey. So to see this here, I think shows a level of responsiveness that is noteworthy. So thanks.
Yep, again, these are for second reading. So they were introduced at our earlier in April 4th meeting. Rob?
It is, I know, given the concerns regarding the surveys that were brought, I know in the beginning of the year, there's usually, or at least in some places, there's a place for parents to opt out sort of at the beginning of the year there. I think it would be helpful, if we can, to put links to these specific policies with that opt-out link, so that this way everybody can see precisely what it is that they're entitled to, precisely what they're opting in or out of, et cetera. It'll just put everything in a nice, pod for everybody to look at. So you don't have to go digging for them.
Yeah, state law is very clear as to what we are required to allow parents to opt out of and what we're not allowed to.
Right. But yeah, to have them have the link right handy to see that we've got the policies in place and can read them for themselves, I think would be helpful.
Is sex education something they can opt out of?
Explicitly in state law.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that
In
was
terms of
clear, because I know that's come up a lot, but, so, there's a rightful discussion about it, but every parent has a right to opt out.
Yep. In terms of curriculum options or curriculum offerings, it's sex education and live animal dissections are the only two where state law requires us to allow opt-outs for any reason. All right. With that, Dana?
Sahar Aziz,
Yes.
Rob Bonaccio,
Yes.
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Layla Morelli,
Yes.
Sonal Patel,
Yes.
Amy Root,
Yes?
Kristen Sonic-Schmelz,
Yes.
Mary Wickens.
Yes.
Thank you. And Amy, turn it over to you for SIP.
Okay. As I mentioned before, I would like the board to consider curriculum items 1 and 2. Could I have a second, please? Thank you, Layla. As I mentioned earlier, item number 1 is to approve for second reading the revised curricula for the high school semester elective for women's studies and the 2 one-semester courses for the gifted grade 5 independent study and research methods. And curriculum item number 2 is the Washington Elementary field trip for 3rd grade to Long Branch to become seashore scientists when they visit the beach. I won't make you say that 10 times fast.
Can you say it 5 times fast?
I'm not going to. Anyone has any comments or questions from the board? Okay.
Who
go ahead.
seconded? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Layla?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sahar Aziz,
Yes.
Rob Bonaccio,
Yes.
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Layla Morelli,
Yes.
Sonal Patel,
Yes.
Amy Root,
Yes?
Kristen Sonic-Schmelz,
Yes.
Mary Wickens.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I ask the board to accept the notes for the record. Any unfinished business? All right, and we do have some new business tonight to discuss. As we saw last week, we're in a rough holding pattern in terms of budget. State law caps us at our ability to raise local revenue, and we're at the state's mercy for external revenue. The 2% cap law went into effect back in 2012 when the board elected to switch to a November election. And I think it's time that we start having a serious conversation as a board, as a district, and as a community about moving our board elections back to April and return the control of the budget back over to the taxpayers. And with that, I want to open it up to the board to start that discussion.
Procedure for getting that going.
So the procedure is we're going to introduce it tonight.
Right.
We're going to talk about it for as many meetings as we need to come to a consensus. And then it will adopt a resolution, send it to the county, and then we follow state timelines from there. The state law is very vague as to what happens. Backing up. When districts elected to move from an April election to a November election, it was explicit as to what happens when, on what timelines. That statute allowed boards to move back to November, but left all of those very clear steps that have to happen out. There's been statute introduced, or there have been bills introduced to try and correct some of those gray areas. Case law is conflicting. Our board attorneys are trying to figure it out for us, so we don't yet have a detailed procedure as to what it will look like for the residents, or what it will do to our terms, because either terms will get shortened or lengthened.
That's what I was curious about,
Yeah,
because
or the
right
timeline.
now we have November coming up, where
Right.
some of us are up for election again, and then
Right.
what happens there if we decide to do?
Right, so terms will most likely be lengthened in a complicated process, according to our, Dana, if you would
Well,
like to.
it's not going to affect the November election.
Yeah, this November
Oh,
is
it would
set in
still-
stone.
It would
Okay.
be next April,
Yeah,
Gotcha.
or the election after.
yeah.
Gotcha.
But we still don't yet have concrete details as to what that looks like from a board perspective. But if the board were to choose to go forward with this, the public would get to vote on our budget next year.
Right.
We would not be held to the same 2% cap, but we are bound by political realities of what the town will accept.
Now, I had a question, because I was reading, if it's opposed by the community, then it goes
So if
to the town, correct?
if the town approves the budget as we present it,
Right.
they're approving the tax levy, is really what the voters are approving. If it's approved, it's done. If
Right.
it's voted down, we turn it over to the Board of School Estimate, which in Westfield is the town council.
Right.
It's not something they've done since 2005. So they would have to learn quickly also, school finance. But that is what would happen. So if the budget's voted down by the voters, it goes over to the Board of School Estimate, town council, and they cut things from our budget. They cut lines, they cut departments, they cut whatever they want.
They cut whatever they want.
Then there's an appeals process if we strongly disagree with it, but let's not go there.
Okay.
It's a more complicated process, but it's a more direct democracy.
Yes.
It's direct democracy. The people get to decide how much they want to have their taxes raised. Just like if we were to issue bonds to build an addition or a new school,
Right.
the voters get direct input. There's obviously pluses and minuses
I
to
know,
this.
I was
It's
just gonna say,
complicated.
it could be
It's
risky.
going to cost us money to both hold an election and the internal effort to pass the budget. But it's a discussion we need to have. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here this time next year having had to cut more teachers. But
Going back to the resolution, what's our timeline for putting a resolution forth? Is there a end date for that timeline where we would
So-
say we are definitely doing this and having a vote in April?
So I would like to do it before the end of the school year, if we're comfortable as a board to do that. The state statute does have strict timelines as to when we have to notify the county if we're going to hold an April election. That isn't until either the end of December or early January. I don't think we should wait that long. This is a major change for the town, and we need to let people know early and remind them often if we're going back to this route.
So having a vote is dependent upon us approving that resolution, and that is the only determining
Yep.
factor.
We can do it ourselves. The town council could force it on us, or the voters could circulate a petition and force it on us.
Brendan?
Yes, Mike.
For clarification, so we have our November election as planned, and now we're going to have our next budget cycle, which would be in April, like we just went through. When would we approve a budget that would exceed the 2% cap?
Well, there is no 2% cap at that point.
No, that would go under the new rules.
Just like we approved a budget back in March to be submitted to the county, that's when the final numbers would be solidified. And the voters would vote on it the third week in April, I believe.
So this come next April 2023, they would vote on the new board members and vote on the budget?
Not necessarily. That's let's not talk about board member elections because that does get complicated as to when that transition takes over.
Okay.
But within a couple of years, board members and the budget will be voted on at the same time, possibly referendums at the same time if we choose to put one up to
So I
the
guess
voters
the
at that
question
point.
then is, we would vote on a new budget and take it to the voters
Mhm.
in April 2023?
Correct.
Okay, that's the question.
Yep. But as of now, November 2022, you, Amy, and myself will be up for re-election. Most likely November 2023. Mary, Sahar, Layla, and Sonal will be up for re-election.
April?
No, November. And then in 2024, Rob, Kristen, and Mary, who were just elected, will be up. And how that gap is filled to get to an April term is complicated. But for the time being, board member elections will stay in November. They will transition to April at some point, to be determined when that happens exactly. There is some two bills pending in the legislature that would clarify that for us, but they haven't moved anywhere yet.
No, I just wanted
They're still
everybody-
hanging out on a possible committee agenda.
Right, I just wanted everybody to know that it would take effect a year from now, that's all.
Yes, the budget will take effect a year from now if we were to go forward with this. This is all hypothetical at this point. We have not taken any action. We haven't even introduced a resolution. This is purely a discussion, and it needs to be had.
Brendan, are we familiar with any districts that have had to do this change and have implemented it?
So I know Clifton has. 23 districts statewide have made a change. Some have switched back. Some had very specific issues they were trying to address. Some districts are, about 40 districts are considering it currently. Those are districts that have been losing state aid consistently over the last couple of years. Toms River, Hillsborough being ones that make the news a lot. There are also 13 districts that never switched from April to November.
So of the 23, are there districts that we have good relationships with where we could talk about like what worked, what didn't work, so we can get a sense of how to make this as seamless as possible?
Between my network with School Boards Association, Ray's network with the Superintendent's Association, and Dana's with ASBO, we have contacts with districts all over the state. It's not always smooth, and the districts aren't always like Westfield. None of our immediate neighboring peer districts have done it, although it's starting to be discussed internally in many districts. The 2% cap with 7% inflation is going to make it a necessary movement unless the state does something with the 2% cap, which I don't see that happening anytime soon because the legislature's up every 2 years and nobody wants to vote for higher property taxes in this state.
So just to clarify, if we go out to vote in April and the budget is approved, and let's say we're asking for a 7% increase or whatever number.
Please don't say that.
Just hypothetically. Hypothetically, 3%, okay.
Going for the biggest number. 4.9 is the average.
Okay. Regardless, does that then puts our operating budget at a higher bracket? So then do we then go back to the cap, or do we stay?
We can choose to stay with an April election. You're right. It does raise our base from which every other percentage going forward is calculated. We can choose to go back to November. The law is silent on that. Originally, when a district moved to November, they were locked in for at least 4 years. That's not the case if we move to April. We could go back at any time, at least as it stands now. Law may change, but as it stands now, we could go back whenever. But we're not bound to a 2% cap as long as the voters get direct say on the budget.
So I just, I want to say, it's what I said last week as well. I think it's really important, we don't have the same turnout, but hopefully people are watching. But I think it's really important that the word is really spread that without this approval, without this support, we're going to be facing the same cuts and more as we continue to have higher costs and, the same state funding.
Yeah, costs that are outside of our control. Some of the costs are within our control. We negotiate collective bargaining agreements with our associations to be competitive. just looking at the county and state averages, we've had to be significantly above 2%.
Right,
In the low 3%
Right,
range.
so regardless, those costs, even if we are negotiating, they're going up.
Right, healthcare costs, I mean, we're self-insured, so it is directly within the control of Westfield teachers and their families, how much healthcare costs. But we're not stuck to a third-party premium, where we're thrown into a pool with a bunch of other districts. Special ed costs are rising at far beyond the 2% cap, particularly for out-of-district placements. They're not bound to any cap, let alone a 2% cap. Transportation costs fall into that same bucket. Luckily, we don't bus all of our students. We bus a very small number, but it's a large chunk of our budget. And transportation's going up approximately 20%, Dana, give or take. Yeah, for out-of-district placements. And those are buses that run with very few kids, but they have to run. And they have to go shortest route from the kid's house to the school. So they can be aggregated a little bit to a degree so that we economize with some neighboring districts if we have students headed to the same final location. But kids can't spend 3 hours a day each way on the bus. So you have a lot of mostly empty buses running these routes. And it's a state mandate, and it's in the best interest of the kids that need transportation, but it's a huge expense for us. Utility costs also going up. Pick a line item, it's going up faster than 2%. Rob?
Sure. I want to make sure a couple things are clear just with what would and would not be before the public. So I want to make sure that the public understands, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they're not necessarily approving the rate of the levy. They're approving what we offer as the rate of the levy. So it's not like we say, well, it's a 4.9% increase, and the public says, well, we're cool with this as long as it's 3% or 4% or whatever. The public doesn't get to move a scale. We present the dinner, and they decide whether it's worth it.
It's a price fixed menu.
Right, exactly.
Yes or no.
Exactly right. So, and the same would be true if there is no line item veto. There is no sense from the public to say, well, you've decided to change this program or reassign this person or cut this person. Well, I want them back, and instead, can you do this? We're not getting into any of that level of granularity. So I want to make sure that's very clear. I appreciate that it was pointed out that should the public vote the budget down, that then goes to the town council, which doesn't have anywhere near the level of involvement that any member of this board has, or any of the administrators or district staff who put this budget together. I need some convincing on this. As my comments are suggesting, it would be foolish to take this out of the tool belt. Because I think there's a lot of different things that we have to do to keep costs under control. And I think this discussion is fine, but I don't want us to have this be the only thing we discuss as an opportunity for savings and revenue enhancement. I'm going to throw a few things out there. I've said a couple of times that there are state mandates that, and we can throw up our hands and say, well, they'll never do it, but we'll never know if we don't try. Part of our work as a board is to advocate for our district. And I've said it before, and I'll promise it again, a lot of the brightest ideas, however you want to take that our state has, are often foisted upon local school districts to figure out how to make them work. And I don't love that. Everything sounds great until you have to figure out how to pay for it. And that's true for transportation mandates. That's true for curricular mandates. We in this district don't just throw a curriculum together and say, well, let's just see what happens, right? There is effort. Sometimes there is outside consulting that needs to get done, and that costs money. So I think we need to take a long, hard look as well at what state mandates we have and which we might want to push back on. I think reviewing the cap, again, we can send letters, we can speak to state boards of education. We all have contacts in the legislature, and we're all blessed to have them on all different sides of them. To talk about indexing a cap to inflation, to talk about changing some of the rules. Dana is a magician when it comes to this budget, and there are questions that the public and that this board asks. It says, well, can't we drop this and rehire that, and can't we change this to do that? And the answer is no, we can't, because there's a rule that says we can't. There's a rule that says we can't take this money from that money, and it's almost unfathomable to those of us who live in the real world and operate real household budgets, because if you have to change something, if you need to fix the air conditioning system, it probably means you're going to take money out of something else that you were going to do and, maybe take a shorter trip somewhere. We need that flexibility. We don't have it here in the schools. And I think we'd be making a mistake not to put all of this together in one pot. This town is talking significantly about areas of redevelopment, which I know is a town council thing, but one of the things that redevelopment brings forth and has brought forth, at least in one instance, are pilot programs. And pilot programs reduce the tax base from which we can draw our budget. They take a building out of the base and basically change the tax structure so that's such that the town gets the bulk of what the taxes are and the rest go to the county. The school board is left with a smaller pool from which to draw the levy. And I don't need to be a math major to know that 2% of a bigger number is bigger than 2% of a smaller number, or 3%, or 4%. We have the ability, and they're doing it in Cranford, I think they're doing it in Garwood as well, to insist that in future pilots we get an allocation from that pilot. And I think we need to lobby that harder. Our town was talking about putting $18 million, now $9 million toward a field in Edison, and that's not, that's certainly not before us, and that's certainly stalled there at this point. But if you're going to give us 18 or 9 million, well, I want my 18 or 9 million. Let's put that towards some of the athletics. Let's put that towards some of the costs that we have here right now that are static, and repurpose some of those other costs for something long term. How well does it work? How does that happen? It's a long discussion, but I would hate for the only discussion we have about this to say, well, let's just move the election. Let's see how much more we can take from our taxpayers. Yeah, it might mean a bit greater contribution there, but it may also mean other creative ways to allocate. I'm not willing to have our tax base shrunk so that we can ask for more on a percentage. It's almost, imagine that fight. Well, we'll take this out of the base and then we can get 4 more here. Well, we take another one out of the base. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. So I think we need a broader strategy than just this one tool. I'm happy to be part. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about it and not volunteer to help out with it. That's not the way that works. But I just want to be sure we're considering every option because it's just what's fair to everybody around. That's my 2 cents.
And Rob, I completely agree with you. There are multiple avenues we can and should pursue. Using our policy and legislative committee would be a strong first move towards advocacy on behalf of Westfield. Over the years, Dana and I, along with other board members, have sat down with members of the legislature, and they look at us and essentially say, "Ha, you're Westfield, deal with it." It's not and those are Westfield residents that are in the legislature. They say the law wasn't meant for districts like Westfield that are operating lean. Suck it up, or go ask your voters for more money. It helps to have honest relationships with the legislators so that they aren't saying, "Oh yeah, we'll take care of that for you," and then nothing happens. But you're pursuing the council on unfunded mandates is something that nobody's done in decades because it has been futile. But if multiple districts bundle together to go after something specific, there is definitely some possibility of something happening there. It would be a tough one to go alone. Just go to Westfield versus the state. But if 20 districts got together, that's at least in my mind something that stands a little bit greater chance of success. But just to clarify on the tax levy question, using a round number, we need $100 million. 2% of that next year, we need $102 million. It doesn't matter. Pilots are irrelevant in that equation, unfortunately, in terms of how much revenue we need. All it does is break that up into larger chunks for each individual household. So the money is raised regardless of pilots, but the individual homeowners pay more because of pilots.
Yeah, I'm not great with that either.
No, neither am I.
No, I know.
I just wanted to explain the process.
It's like splitting dinner, right? 3 groups go out to dinner, right? You all take it. It's $300. Everybody pays $100. If it's somebody's anniversary, the other 2 decide, hey, let's take you guys out. So now it's $150 a head. I don't want to pay $150 a head either. I'd rather make sure that we're exploring all options. I mean, I realize we're talking about a lot of trying to figure out the least terrible options to do whatever it is. But at some point, somebody's got to be the first one to take a jump in the pool. And if it's got to be us, I don't see why not. And nobody here thinks I'm not honest. Certainly after the last couple of meetings. So, like I said, it'd be a mistake to take this off the table. it'd be a mistake not to think that this might be necessary regardless of however we go about it, but it would also be a mistake to make this the only thing we do, I think.
Right. It would be a mistake to do this once on a crowded agenda instead of having this large board discussion open in public. This is going to be a huge change if the board goes through with it. The town needs to be on board with it because we're going to need them to be on board with our budget next year.
I mean, look, one of the things that people talk about is they don't have enough meat to discuss things in advance. So, you know, we're giving folks the chance to hear about this thought now in advance, right? It's, you know, sometimes you see a process works well, you tweak it, right? So we're giving the public the chance now to hear the very first initial discussions about this. Think about it, turn it over, come back, give some comment, and help educate us on a decision that's going to affect the whole community. So it's a great idea to start it. Happy we did, you know, and thank you for starting.
But I just also,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just also, I hear what you're saying. I think it's probably best if we consider doing all or multiple of those things, going out to vote and, you know, in the immediate crisis, and also consider all of the other things that you're talking about, and having real plans and real ideas and real things that we're going to actually do, not just, obviously we all have to have the discussion, but more than just the discussion, like this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to tackle it. I think that coming from both sides is going to only benefit the town and the Board of Ed. So I agree with that.
And just to add, Layla, what you were saying, in terms of, yes, we can pursue all these other avenues, but this was within our realm of something we can push, we can drive, we can promote, and it's also something we can get done sooner than some of these other avenues because we saw the need, we saw what happened and what could happen going in the future. This is something that could affect the budget for the next school year as opposed to some of the other things that will take longer.
Yep. I mean, the question I came away with from last week's board meeting is how do we prevent this from happening again? I mean, this was a discussion we've been having internally for a while. It's not something that came out of last week's board meeting. But the importance or the nexus to have the conversation publicly got expedited. So just in terms of process, in terms of how I'm thinking through on this, we'll continue this conversation again at our next board meeting. If we're generally reaching a consensus, then our June board meeting, we'll introduce a resolution and then finalize it by the end of June. So that's 4 board meetings for the public to weigh in on this, counting tonight. With that.
Brendan, is this part of long-range planning committee? Like, where will this go further before it comes back to this general board? Is it happening in long-range planning?
So this is a conversation that started in long-range planning. Well, finance long-range planning, my own head 2 years ago. It's something that it grew organically out of conversation of how do we solve this problem. A resolution will come back to the board. Dana's office will prepare it, I'm assuming. And it will come back under new business and then move to old business for the final adoption. It won't be part of any specific committee's report because this is something the whole board has to own. Sarah?
Rob's points are well taken. I don't think we disagree in theory. I think the problem is how long it will take. And as Brendan said, whether it's going to be futile or not, because once you're dealing with the state legislature and you're dealing with the town council, and now you have all these different stakeholders and variables that we don't have as much control over, which is similar to what Sonal was saying. I think that's where, again, agreeing with Layla, is it becomes two-track. Because right now, at least the concern that I have is next year. What we saw last week was heartbreaking, right? And I don't think any of us want the music and fine arts program to shrink in any way. And we don't want the sports program to shrink, and we don't want our academic programs to be compromised. So I'd like to at least just focus on the urgency of the issue and have that as a parallel track for the longer midterm to long-term plan. Again, I don't know if there are professional lobbyists that school boards hire to deal with making sure that the mandates are actually funded by the state, that are imposed by the state. But if that's the case, then maybe that should be included in the discussion, because I agree. I mean, I think we both know if it's just Westfield fighting it alone, it's going to be, unless we have a remarkably powerful state legislatures, I'm not optimistic. But I just wanted to highlight a few things that we're missing that I find to be unacceptable. We don't have a full-day kindergarten in our district. I think we're one of, what, like, is it 8% of the districts? We're a tiny, and we all know about the value of early education and preschool education in terms of how that impacts, the long-term impact on learning for students. We don't have enough space for a lot of the special education needs of our students, and if we had more space, some of them we could keep. I realize not all of them. It's very individualized, but we could also be bringing in students from outside the district, and that could be revenue generating, because my understanding, and others on the board have more expertise, is that there's some special education programs that Westfield conducts that are very high quality and are in demand by students outside the district who have those needs, but we don't have the space to bring them, and if we did, we could at the very least offset the high rise of costs of students who are going out because their needs aren't being met in the district. So we don't have enough space. We don't have any, at least I haven't seen any STEM programs in the elementary school. We don't have maker spaces. It's just bare bone minimum meeting the standards. Enrichment programs in elementary school after school, because we don't have the funding to be able to provide the stipends for the students who actually have the expertise and are willing to do it. And I don't know if any of you all have benefited. My child benefited from one enrichment program, which was wonderful, and then it stopped, and it wasn't just about COVID. But there's costs involved. We don't want to shrink the sports program. So my concern is, I'm definitely leaning towards doing whatever we have to do as a town together to make sure we're investing in our students, especially since this year, I think the average household paid a $103 increase. That's not a lot of money. So if we keep paying $103 every year per household, we should just expect, and we should be honest with our town and say, you should expect more cuts. Because $103 per household in a wealthy town is just not enough to fund a high-quality education.
Sahar, that's 103 on top of the 10,000 that they were already paying.
No, I know. I'm talking about the increase. The
Right,
increase,
right.
if we're increasing by $103, meanwhile, we've got all these costs of living and inflation's about to, and that's a whole different separate macroeconomic issue, is we also have to be practical that you get what you pay for. So, I mean, I don't think anybody none of us just say, oh yeah, I want to pay more taxes, but some of us do feel like I will invest what's necessary for the high quality public education. The other thing that I just want to throw this out there just to think about is there is always the option of doing kind of this one-time adjustment so that we can just get our base high enough to make up for the 10 years of underfunding. Because this is essentially what it seems to me, as somebody who just joined the board, is this is a can that's been kicked down the road. And we've hit it 10 years, and now it can't be kicked any farther without cutting substantive programs. So if we do an adjustment, it doesn't necessarily mean that even when the taxpayers are voting that we're going to have high rates. We may ask for 2.5% after the initial adjustment, correct? In other words, it doesn't have to be 4.9, that was the average. It could be 2.5, it could be 3.0, but it gives the town flexibility to decide how much the town wants to invest in its school district. Because right now, there's no flexibility. The town's investing 2% more in tax levy every year, and that's it. And then we just take whatever that gives us, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of budgeting, it's been pretty simple for us. I mean, the actual nuts and bolts of making the budget work hasn't, but we're allowed to raise the budget 2%. Our costs are rising at least 2%, so we're going to raise it 2%. If we go back to an April election, there has to be strategy involved then, on the part of the board, reflecting the political environment of the town. The town might be more than willing to do a one-year adjustment. Or it might be better to phase it in over 5 years so that it's a lower increment each time. Those are things we have to pull the town on. Not formally pull them, but focus groups figure out what the pulse of the town is on raising revenue.
But it
And-
gives us
and-
the flexibility to do that. Right now, our hands are completely tied. So last week, we had all these very passionate people who we were all thrilled to have them, asking us to do things that we had absolutely no control. It was a deep sense of powerlessness that I don't think we all want to feel. Whereas at least if we go to the town and say, look, here's the budget, we're going to give you all the line items, we'll be as transparent as possible, and here's what you're going to get for the additional funds that will be above 2%, because if it's not above 2%, what's the point of doing this? And every year can be different depending on the needs of the schools. But at least my point is we get the flexibility, and I think it gives agency to the residents.
But to be clear, they're not going to, it's not a base question, and then this is what we'd like to do with the extra money. It's this is what we're going to do with all the money question.
Well, I understand, but,
Yeah.
but we're going to explain that all this money is an increase of X% based on last year. I mean, that's easy to calculate.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So they'll understand that that'll translate into, for example, an additional $200 a year per household, an additional $500 per household. We can give them those numbers.
But under the current November election that we're operating under, with the 2% cap, we can choose to go to the voters for a specific program that we want to do above the 2%. And the voters get to weigh in on a specific program, whether they want to expand it or not, or offer it or not. That's not an option. That's not the same kind of question we're asking right now.
Right, which would be fine if we didn't face this existential crisis where we may be cutting in, we're getting now to essential programs rather than we need a full day.
Right. Well, I mean, this was something, it started with full day kindergarten with us. The timing of it, because it's a November election, we can't use that money in September. We have to use it during that academic year, but we can't use it in September. So you're going to expand a program in January at the end of the semester break, because that's when it makes the most sense. How are you going to find that many staff members available for a mid-year position?
Dana, do you have any, I'm just curious, if for any reason we had, which I presume we probably have to go to a separate bond for the full day kindergarten, anything that requires space because it's so expensive to build space. But if we were able to increase our operating budget due to changing the election cycle and asking for more money for residents, would it be more feasible to then be able, assuming the taxpayers approve, would it be more feasible for us to have the space now to do the full day kindergarten and I hope be able to bring more out of district students, for other programs and hire people, because now we have the operating budget to pay the staff, so we can actually keep the staff rather than not have enough to pay them?
Right, so what you would do is you'd go out for a bond referendum for the facility side. Assuming that gets approved, we would go ahead and move forward with the additions. And then when the September that we know the additions would be done and we'd be able to implement full day K, the April before that, we would include the costs in our operating budget. Hopefully it would get approved, and then you would be able to start school in September. That's the problem that we have not been able to overcome in the past with a November election, and then the November election, if it's not approved in November, then you can't do anything. It's out there and it's either approved or it's not. With an April election, if the budget's not approved, let's say you have money in there for full day K, and the budget's not approved, and you go to the town council and the town council cuts, $1 million. They can cut it in kindergarten, but you could decide, well, we're not cutting kindergarten, we're going to move money into kindergarten and we'll cut something else. You can't increase the dollar amount, but you have flexibility. With a November election, you have no flexibility. When it goes out for a vote, if it's not approved, you can't reallocate to cover those costs.
It's essentially a referendum on the operating budget, on a specific program in the operating
On a
budget.
specific program that's a non-mandated program, so nothing that we're mandated to do would be able to go into a November election.
Right, and if the state were to come along and mandate full day kindergarten, we couldn't put that into a November referendum anyway, at least the way the law stands today.
Yeah, except that we also couldn't exceed cap, so they'd
Right.
have to give us some method to be able to do that, because
Yeah.
right now we would have no way to do that.
Right, but the hypotheticals on that,
Yeah.
to the way the law stands now, we couldn't do a mandatory program through a November referendum.
That's correct.
Amy?
I just wanted to make one comment because I'm not going to be able to attend the next public board meeting. So you're getting my comment now, which is just when I first moved to Westfield, we were voting in April. Many of you have lived here that long, I know that. And as we saw in the slides that Dana has given at the previous board meetings that talks about what was the rate of increase over the years before the 2% cap got into place, there was some variability there. So it was really dependent on what did we feel, what did the district feel was the right number to ask for. There is obviously an education process with that goes on then every year to talk about what's different. Why is this number the number that it is in terms of what we're asking for a rate of increase? For some people who have moved to Westfield since 2010, only know the November election with the 2% cap, that's going to feel different and that's going to seem different. And that definitely puts the onus on all of us to try to do our best to explain what we understand about the process, answer questions, moving ahead into the new strategic plan in the next coming school year will be another opportunity for exploring dialogue about that, which will be really helpful. And the thing that I wanted to say about this is that I know that one of the things that's been frustrating from running the district side is because Westfield as a town has always been supportive of its public school system, although the number had fluctuated, there's only been 1 year in my memory where the annual budget was voted down, back when people voted on the budget every year. And I think it was voted down by 34 votes in a town of our size. So when the town council took a look at the budget and made a recommendation for cuts, they took that into account, the fact that it was not an overwhelming defeat of the budget. So that will probably have some influence moving forward as well. Obviously, if we're recommending a budget, we're going to the effort of educating people about what's in the budget and why we think it's a reasonable ask. We don't want it to be voted down, but that's probably going to be part of the equation moving forward as well. So, and I just also wanted to highlight that, because Westfield does value its public schools, for many of us, it's why we moved here. We want the community's engagement and we want their support. So that is going to be an important part of the process as we move forward.
Absolutely. I believe that was 2004, although I could be off by a year. The time before that when the budget was voted down was 1995, and 21 out of 21 towns in Union County voted down the budget that year. It was one of those wave elections where almost every budget statewide was voted down. I believe somebody was running for governor on a toilet paper tax, adding or expanding out the sales tax, and there was just a tax revolt. But yeah, this town has historically always supported its schools. One budget voted down, one referendum voted down since 2000. When that referendum came back up for a vote in a different form, it was approved overwhelmingly. So this town supports its schools. It's why we're all here. And I hope to continue the conversation with the public. Yeah, Mike.
Just a couple of comments on Rob's comment about working with legislators. I do agree with that, but then I also agree with Sahar. We know how slow Trenton moves on things, and while we might have good ideas, they move at a very slow pace. And just from a perspective for people that might be newer to town, I think it's approximately 60% of your tax that you pay in your property taxes go toward the Board of Education versus the other 40% go toward the county and the municipal taxes. So when you look at what your tax payment might be per year, I think the average home's assessed at around $800,000, don't quote me on that, and your taxes are approximately $17,000. It wouldn't be a 5% increase over your whole 17, using the 4.9 example, I'm rounding to 5. It wouldn't be a 5% increase on your overall taxes. It would be 5% on the school portion of your taxes. So if we had a 5% increase that 1 year, that would equate to probably $500 versus, as Sahar mentioned, we have this $100 tax increase per year, which given the way the salaries are structured and everything going up from school buses to food to everything else in the district, that's what's really causing us not to be sustainable. And if we have an increase beyond the 2% next year, then we can look at the more measured increases beyond that going forward. So it's not going to be 5% every year. I think we'll probably more flatline and hopefully get it back down to 2% or 3% But we now have that flexibility, I think, by allowing us to go and set the budgets, bring it to the voters, and allow the voters to make the decision, and they would obviously see what we're spending the money on based on the budget presentations.
Yep, we have to get to a point of sustainability where we can maintain what we have going before we can even start talking about expanding out new programs, be it full day kindergarten or STEM or expanding out the arts. Pick your pet project. We can't talk about any of that until we can get on some solid ground from what we need to do by state law as a district. Any other questions, comments? All right. With that, I'm going to close out our discussion of moving to an April election for this board meeting. We will continue it again at our next board meeting. Again, at the end of the agenda, will then be under unfinished business. Any liaison reports? Leila?
So I was at Jefferson's PTO meeting, not last week, but the week before, their executive meeting, and they have a lot of really exciting things coming back that haven't been back. There is going to be their Jubilee, which is an amazing event, and it will be held at the high school June 17th and 18th. I loved when my kids were a part of that. It's a huge fundraiser for the school. And on May 6th, there will be the Jaguar Jog, which if you know a kid in Jefferson and you want to donate, you should, because the proceeds are going to save the children in Ukraine and perhaps another hospital in Ukraine as well. So I just wanted to let you know about those fun events.
Yep, I was on April 22nd. I attended Franklin's executive board meeting as well. Similar kind of excitement about the spring calendar at the school. Almost an embarrassment of riches of activities, and hard to fit things all in. There was some discussion about how Tech Week for the 5th grade spring drama performance was going to be working with the now with the give back of snow days around Memorial Day weekend. So I'm sure they'll figure that out. There's also the return of the parent fundraiser at Franklin called The Bash, which is this coming Friday. So I know they're excited about that and have a lot of things in the hopper to work on. And I think the day before that I had gone to the high school PTSO meeting as well. Their executive board, that's a fun one because the students actually come and attend the meeting, usually only for about 5 minutes before they have to go get back to class, which is why they do it in the morning at school. But that was really interesting because it was insightful to hear because the homecoming dance in the fall was restricted to seniors only because of numbers and concerns about COVID. There was a determination made to do a spring dance for the underclassmen, and there was, I know, some confusion. Why didn't the parents know about this? They've never done it before. So it was an adaptation that needed to be kind of worked out on the fly. And as with many things, when the students get involved, they are concerned about communicating to the students and maybe not so much to the parents. So I know the parents on the board were trying to work that out. But what was ironic about the whole thing was that it was held on a Friday night, and there was some question about, but the next day was PSATs for sophomores and what bad timing that was. It was literally the only time they could get the gym for the dance at their own school because there's so much going on at the schools. So it sounds like it was pretty well attended. I saw some great pictures on social media. So, but again, lots happening there as well. I drove by this morning and saw some kids waiting to get going into AP classes. I know we use some space at the Armory for that every spring. So things are coming back for sure. So thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Mary Sonal, liaison reports. Sahar, liaison report.
I do.
Go for it, Kristen.
I have two of them. Washington, I just wanted to announce on April 23rd, they hosted their first multicultural festival, and it was fabulous. We had 21 countries represented. We had 150 passports stamped. The students and the parents came in native dress. There were all kinds of exhibits. They were cooking food. They were sharing different kinds of food samples that they had made at home. There was music, craft projects. And to Sahar's point, I wanted to share it because I'm sure it's been mentioned at PTC, but just to kind of encourage that consistency across the district. It was a first-time event, but, I mean, the energy in the room was fantastic, so I wanted to share that. And then on behalf of the Westfield Municipal Alliance, I also am the liaison for that, and I wanted to thank them for helping bring Stephen Hill to our middle schools. He worked with our 8th graders in both large and small groups at Edison and Roosevelt, and it was really well received. Teachers, counselors, principals, everybody has requested that we see what we can do to make it an annual event, so I wanted to thank them too.
Thank you, Kristen. Rob, liaison report? Mike?
Can I just add one thing? I forgot, from the PTC this past Friday was Crossing Guard Appreciation Day, and for the first time in years, I wasn't able to attend, and I'm really sorry, but I heard coverage about it, and we received a thank you note to forward on to the people that were the organizers for that. So that's always a lovely tradition, great opportunity for people to meet our crossing guards up front and in person, as opposed from behind their windshield. So a great event, and hopefully I'll be able to attend next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. I don't have any liaison reports for meetings I've attended. I will be attending the NJSIAA Executive Committee next Wednesday and the NJSBA Board of Directors meeting on Friday the 13th. There is a delegate assembly for the New Jersey School Boards Association on Saturday the 14th. It's where a member of every district statewide gets together and decides on legislation that governs the NJSBA and includes an advocacy agenda for what the state association will be lobbying the legislature on over the next 6 months to a year. More locally, on May 18th, so the day after our next board meeting, the Union County School Boards Association will be meeting at Kane University for their annual Unsung Heroes award ceremony. This is where one student from each district is recognized for going above and beyond in a way that wouldn't be expected. You hear stories of the kid that reached out and prevented a suicide. Just really heartwarming stories for kids that wouldn't normally be recognized for stepping up. And it's free, dinner's included. So it's also open to the public for anybody that's interested. Again, May 18th, it's dinner starts at 6 o'clock. The presentation starts at 7:15 at Kane University. Anybody that's interested, let me know, and I'll make sure you get registered.
Oh, do we know who's being honored from Westfield?
Not yet,
Oh.
but I'll find out and I'll let you know. All right, if there are no more liaison reports, I'll reopen public comment. During this portion of the meeting, members of the public are invited to address the Board of Education on any topic. The board requests that individuals state their name and address for the record and asks that all remarks be directed to the board president or designee, not to individual board members or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey, and the board bears no responsibility nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, the superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during this public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant's statement. Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting, and each speaker's statement will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes in duration. If anybody would like to address us, please come to the podium now. And again, name and address for the record.
Hi, good evening. Terry Brennan. My address is 862 Rahway Avenue. I would like to address the Edison Fields proposal. This Board of Education always seems to be forced to make do with not enough money in its budget, yet the town government always seems to have all the money they need. An opportunity to do right by our kids is approaching, and I urge the Board of Education, a body with serious budget issues, to not give away for free its extremely valuable land behind Edison Intermediate School. The town government wants to fumble $9 million of taxpayer money to shoehorn almost 6 acres of artificial turf and stadium lights where a schoolyard currently is, for the primary benefit of private sector sports league interests, and extremely limited benefit to our town's kids. The town government wants to be given 6 acres for free and plans to spend the equivalent of a third of the town's entire annual operating budget, obscene money that the town doesn't have, on a project the mayor has publicly admitted will not even come close to solving the problem of our kids having to travel in droves to other towns to play sports. That is because the reason our kids are traveling to other towns to play sports is not because we don't have an extra artificial turf field. We already have 3 of those. They didn't solve the problem either. A large part of the reason why our kids have to travel is that the town simply refuses to properly maintain our town-owned natural grass fields or help the Board of Education afford to properly maintain its many grass fields. I'm a parent of 4th graders who play sports. We are sports people. They play soccer, basketball, softball, and tennis. And my kids, my twins, will enter Edison in 2023. I and my kids do not want the Board of Education to partner with the town government to take away my children's middle school schoolyard, replace it with toxic spent truck tires, dumped into an unrecyclable artificial field that heats up to 60 degrees hotter than natural grass, all the while teaching environmental responsibility in the curriculum. Talk about sending mixed messages to our kids. And surely this body shouldn't consider giving an asset away for free while it's forced to lay off teachers. This Edison Fields project will also ruin a neighborhood, creating nighttime noise, unsafe nighttime pedestrian conditions,
30 seconds.
and overtaxing an already overtaxed sewer drainage system. Please urge the town government to use the $9 million instead to make every single Board of Education field, as well as the town-owned grass fields, playable with well-draining, durable, pitched, natural grass construction, and then actually maintain those fields, and once and for all, solve Westfield's athletic field capacity problem. Please do not allow the town to pursue this Edison Fields mistake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
I'm Janet Onishi at 759 Knollwood Terrace. Good evening. At the Town Council meeting last week, it was announced that CMA Associates was retained to review the Edison Field project and address outstanding questions by residents, which include a cost analysis, capacity issues, and a comparison of natural to artificial grass turf fields. The study did not mention an assessment of residents' concerns expressed about the health and safety of children who will also be regularly playing on these fields. This includes the students who attend Edison Intermediate School. The town's presentation on September 20th, 2021, the town concluded that there were no health concerns with artificial turf. Multiple residents have expressed concerns over the last few months that public health experts have issued warnings about the dangers of exposing prepubescent children on a regular basis to chemicals in artificial turf. The concern is regular exposure to chemicals and endocrine disrupting and carcinogenic activity. The public health experts we have quoted are from reputable institutions. In earlier presentations, I have summarized the limitation of the status of the research in the field of artificial turf and health. I pointed out that incomplete research cannot be interpreted playing on the fields is safe. When weather permits, children take physical education and lunch recess outdoors in Westfield. If the Edison Field project is completed with artificial turf fields, the children who attend Edison will be regularly exposed to chemicals in the chrome rubber infill. The current plans show that except for the fenced-in varsity baseball field, the fields behind Edison will have artificial turf. Edison will be the only school in Westfield with artificial turf on school grounds. Protecting children who attend Edison is your responsibility. Natural grass athletic fields behind Edison could meet the town's needs to increase field capacity and provide a safe and healthy environment for the children who attend the school. Now, we're going to wait for the report from CME Associates. But at the end of the day, you will be the ones that decide what is best for the children who will attend Edison Intermediate School over a 30-year period, as that's my understanding for the LOI, is a 30-year period. I sincerely hope that you have learned from what I have shared with you and will seriously consider having the town put in natural grass fields behind Edison. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Onishi.
Good evening, everyone. Tim Eaton, 762 Knollwood Terrace. My wife and I have lived on Knollwood Terrace in Westfield for 35 years. Knollwood Terrace and the surrounding neighborhood is a great place to live, providing a quiet, peaceful, safe, and beautiful environment. That is why we moved here. The Edison Field project will change all of this. We and our neighbors are very concerned about the changes proposed, which will impact the safety and health of students, as well as our safety, health, environment, and quality of life. The 250,000 square foot artificial turf will generate safety and environmental concerns. The materials in these fields are linked to cancer, nervous system disorders, immune disorders, and other health issues. Non-contact injuries are more likely to happen on artificial turf. Is this what we want for our students and neighborhoods? Natural grass fields are safer for our students and preserve the green environment. The increased noise levels coupled with tower lights at night will compromise indoor and outdoor activities, impacting our quality of life and mental health. Increased water levels and flooding will result from the runoff into the creek adjacent to the Edison Field. Chemicals from the field will pollute the water. Wildlife will be negatively impacted. Since there is a lack of adequate parking on school grounds, parking and traffic will increase on Knollwood Terrace and other neighboring streets. There will be less room for walks, bike rides, and other activities. Safety will be compromised. For these reasons and others, we are asking you to consider alternatives to the proposed Edison Field project plan. Equitably spreading the increased field capacity needed over multiple locations, which have been discussed in the past, throughout the town, and using grass fields and no tower lights is the right thing to do. Family, home, and neighborhood are our most important assets. Please protect the students with natural grass fields, and please do not take away this great neighborhood of ours with the Edison Field project. The impact on health, safety, environment, and quality of life is very concerning. It should not happen in this great town of Westfield. Using multiple locations with grass fields and no tower lights is the right answer. Please be an advocate for our students and our neighborhoods as decisions in the future are made. There are solutions which can increase field capacity, keep students safe, and preserve our neighborhoods. One does not have to be sacrificed for the other. Please vote down the Edison Field project as it stands today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton.
Hi, I'm Ken Warren. I live at 5 Doris Parkway in Westfield. Good evening, Board. I'm here to speak briefly about the Edison Sports Complex being proposed. As you all know, this is already a very densely populated area with many activities along this mile. The town, for example, the town already has the intermediate school, the Armory, high school, Keller Field, Lincoln School, next to a children's park, Tamaqua Elementary, Tamaqua Park, and the Houlihan and Sid Fay Fields, all along this stretch. Putting a sports complex in back of Edison is just asking for a tragic accident waiting to happen. Traffic along these neighboring streets until 10 at night on weekdays and from early morning to late at night on weekends is not smart. When a tragedy occurs, and it will, who's going to be responsible and liable for that? I would think that the town would have to assume some responsibility, as with the school system. This proposed complex with turf and lights is a solution that only satisfies primarily small special interest groups. club sports. Why should all the children who attend Edison and live in the area have to suffer the burden for this overcrowding? Just a small private revenue-generating sports club or clubs, which includes a lot of out-of-town children. This isn't just for Westfield kids. The proposed turf field, as stated, translates into Edison children either playing on possibly hot and unhealthy turf or playing caged inside a fenced baseball field like zoo animals. That's something I don't think any of us can agree on as being good for our children, or all of us can agree on. As results show year after year, Westfield children are playing more college sports than ever, and all kids are enjoying sports. So why is this needed? The kids are doing great, even if parents have to drive somewhere else at night for the kids to practice. Today's youngsters move on, but the Edison complex won't. It will be there forever, as will this dangerous traffic site. With the recent cuts in Westfield staff, which includes a disproportionate number of the arts, as you saw last week, out of the 24 positions, I ask that you analyze the optics. No sports programs were impacted, yet there are as many children involved in the arts as there are in sports. And again, keep in mind this field benefits mostly club sports, more than it does the school district. The town is asking for $9 million for a sports field, while at the same time laying off 24 positions. You may think that these are separate buckets, but the reality is it's all taxpayer money. Sadly, it appears that the popular and more vocal people get what they want. I thought this type of attitude ended in high school. The town is clearly trying to avoid a vote going down this route, which has put you, the board, in an awkward position. I ask that you do the right thing. Don't vote for a dangerous solution, but a good, safe solution. This can't be about politics, about whether you're friends with the mayor or someone on the town council, not when our children's safety is involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle George, Short Hills Court. Don't let a good crisis go to waste, I guess. The way ballot resolutions are worded are notoriously confusing. People will not understand the impact of voting yes on a $200 million, let's say, budget ballot referendum will have on their tax levy. I would strongly recommend that a one-time raise be considered instead. We're 24th in the state on property tax already. On a different topic, another week, more recent cases of swastikas in the high school. This time, though, we were assured that the swastika was old and wasn't any cause for alarm. It was reported by a, quote, upstander, capital U, whatever that is, because apparently having expectations that high school students be law-abiding citizens is too much, and we need to create a virtual trophy program for simply doing the right thing. I mean, I applaud people for reporting this to the school. I really do. Kids, please keep reporting all the swastikas you find. And given the rate of swastikas this school year, something tells me it won't be the last one. But reporting these acts of hate should just be an expectation of anyone living by an honor code. You don't need a badge to have honor. Principal Asfindis' email assured everyone it was old and nothing to worry about. I would like to know what kind of carbon dating was done to determine the age of the swastika, or perhaps some forensic ink analyst was brought in to do ink comparisons with the FBI ink database. That's a real thing. You can look it up. I'm sure Westfield employed some real CSI techniques to make this determination. I'm clearly being sarcastic. Now I'm not. The email was sent on the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day. Maybe, if we improved the Holocaust curriculum, we'd remember it better. Ms. Affindis' email did express concern that we are desensitizing the community to these acts. I share this concern, but not because of sending emails about them. Rather, the district's contortions and lack of meaningful action are desensitizing the community. On another topic, we've discussed Ms. Aziz's tweets and retweets before. Ms. Aziz continues to tweet and retweet. On May 2nd, Ms. Aziz retweeted, quote, "I'm not scared of the ADL or its predictable racist smear campaigns," end quote. Again, ADL is a district partner for No Place for Hate. I just want to point out this immense privilege Ms. Aziz is exercising. The privilege of being able to operate under a different ethical expectation and standard as the rest of the members of the BOE.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Gary Morris, South Avenue, Fanwood. I just want to talk about opt-in versus opt-out. and I think it's always good to use an illustration. And this is a really simple one. Each one of you was given a cup tonight, and there's a plastic cup. Only one person is using it, right? If you guys opted in, you would have only needed one cup. Instead, we have 12 cups or 11 cups. 11 cups are going to be thrown in the garbage and not used because the default is opt-in, okay? If the default was opt-out, we'd only have one cup for the gentleman who wanted a cup. And that's the importance, because we're all busy, okay? People are really busy. And I'll tell you, I had an experience sorry, that was nice. I had an experience in my town talking about books and things with somebody I worked with. She didn't have the time. She's a single mom, didn't have the time to read these books. When I told her what was in these books, her eyes welled up and she told me, I feel like such a terrible parent because I didn't read the books with my child. I was blessed that I have an amazing wife, that she and I would read the books with them, and we would pick and choose them carefully. And I'd like to quickly read this thing, which I think is really appropriate, from The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. This is from Corrie as a child, as she's riding on a train with her dad. And so, seated next to Father in the train compartment, I suddenly asked, Father, what is sex sin? He turned to look at me as he always did when answering a question, but to my surprise, he said nothing. At last, he stood up, lifted his traveling case from the rack over our heads, and set it on the floor. Will you carry it off the train, Corrie? He said. I stood up and tugged at it. It was crammed with watches and spare parts he had purchased that morning. It's too heavy, I said. Yes, he said. And it would be a pretty poor father who would ask his little daughter to carry such a load. It's the same way, Corrie, with knowledge. Some knowledge is too heavy for children. When you are older and stronger, you can bear it. For now, you must trust me to carry it for you. And I was satisfied, more than satisfied, wonderfully at peace. There were answers to this and all my hard questions. For now, I was content to leave them in my Father's keeping. And I think that just speaks volumes of what a parent's responsibility is, okay? Some kids may be able to read a book that has sexually explicit stuff in it. But personally, I think it would be good to make it an opt-in, where people have to opt in to have that, rather than have parents ostracized for wanting to opt out. Simple as that. And incidentally, the interesting thing is, Corrie ten Boom's family worked to save 8,000 Jews in the Holocaust. 8,000. A Christian family, many of those people in her family died as a result. Giving up, loving your neighbor.
Hi, my name is Kristen Wilson. My address is 13 Normandy Drive. I have 3 children in the district. My youngest is a 3rd grader at Tamaqua School. Last week, he came home from school, and he was so proud and so excited to tell me that Tamaqua was chosen to host a special Arbor Day celebration. And with events like this, the outdoor classroom, the garden, I'm so happy that the students are learning about the benefits and importance of caring for the environment. But on the other hand, it is disheartening to know that my son and his Tamaqua classmates could arrive at Edison in a couple years to a school where nearly all of the grass has been replaced by artificial turf. Not only does this fly in the face of what the students are learning, it also raises health concerns. The artificial turf industry likes to claim that their products are safe, but health experts have been raising alarms about the potential dangers of artificial turf, particularly for adolescents, which is precisely the age of Edison students. The truth is that artificial turf hasn't been proven safe because it hasn't been studied enough. But we do know that the plastic blades and backing contain PFAS, a class of chemicals known to be linked to numerous health problems, including cancer, nervous system toxicity, immune dysfunction, thyroid, and cardiovascular disease. At one point, we didn't know how harmful exposure to things like smoke, asbestos, and lead paint are. That only became apparent with time and prolonged exposure. I don't want to see the same things happen with our kids and artificial turf. Edison students already have artificial turf exposure during some gym classes at Keller Field, which was completed years ago and perhaps before information was available about the chemicals in turf. Let's not add to that by creating exposure on the back Edison fields, where students not only have gym class, but can play and socialize during their lunch period. Once the artificial grass is ripped out and replaced, once the natural grass is ripped out and replaced with artificial turf, it's impossible or nearly so to return to a natural state. Just today, I read about a new initiative in the state called Outside Together that will focus on recreation and our natural resources. And as of tomorrow, the New Jersey plastic bag ban takes effect. That's where things are going. In 2022, replacing natural grass with plastic doesn't seem very timely or forward-thinking. Truthfully, all of our school fields could use an upgrade. The town has indicated that they would spend about $9 million to build just 2 artificial turf fields at Edison. Instead, why not use that money, or perhaps even less money, to install properly designed natural grass athletic fields at all of the schools in town? The existing school fields are not properly built and maintained and often can't even be used for recess because they're too muddy. Earlier this evening, I picked up my older son from Jefferson from Ultimate Frisbee, and he commented on how bad the fields there are. Installing well-designed fields at all schools will provide a much bigger benefit to all students in Westfield, as they can enjoy safe, healthy play areas for extracurricular activities, plus for gym and recess at school every day. Additionally, the area around Edison is already very busy with the high school, Edison, Lincoln, and Tamaqua, all within a short distance. Instead of drawing more traffic to the area, having quality fields all around town will enable more kids to walk to nearby fields and keep the area around Edison walkable and bikeable for the kids in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Laura Williamson. My address is 722 Coleman Place. I just want to start off by saying I'm not a great public speaker. I'm a hospice nurse. And in the last few weeks, I've been traveling through the 5 stages of grief. Currently, I'm sandwiched between stage 3 and 4. When I first heard the news of the teacher cuts, I was in denial. Ms. Francis, Mr. DeFabio, then anger. My thoughts of several teachers across the district that have parents trying every which way not to have their children get. They should go. And now bargaining and depression. Cut a gym teacher, shuffle around a language teacher. Why can't these adjustments in staffing affect more than the music and theater department at the high school level? Sadness, because the budget passed. Being at the meeting 2 weeks ago with my son and so many of his high school group left us feeling so disappointed. You were getting irritated that we were outraged. You started off saying that there would be no reduction in programs or course offerings, that you were avoiding impact to students, and then by the end of the evening, board members were openly admitting that things were going to change. Unless your students have these teachers, you do not understand. Ms. Francis is a treasure. At a time when the buzzwords are social emotional learning, and after the high school students and parents took a survey showing just how much stress the kids feel, we're going to take away 2 beloved teachers, 2 teachers that help alleviate the stress. Ms. Francis is a cheerleader for our children. She makes them feel good about who they are and what they can do. She builds up their self-esteem like it's the most important thing. And at this age, when social media is right there to tear it down, it might just be the most important thing. Just 2 days ago, 24 of our students found out they were admitted to all-state chorus. This number is because of Ms. Francis. She teaches and assists every student that wants to audition for the honors choruses. She works with students on their classical piece projects because she knows classical technique. There are 45 students in the concert choir class, and she could play the piano when Mr. B is conducting, or she can work with separate voice parts when they need to break the class up so that each voice part can learn what they need to learn. Have you figured out how eliminating her position will not impact students yet? It's impossible. Who will teach Bella Cora? Or is that a class that will be eliminated? It sounds as if that will impact students. Students have 45 kids in their gym classes and have 2 teachers. I'm sad that we cannot find a way to have 2 teachers in a classroom of 45 singers. And Mr. DeFabio, One evening last year, I saw him at the high school breaking down equipment way later than 5 p.m. A few days later, I saw him on the lawn at Roosevelt early in the morning setting up the microphones and cords so that we could have an 8th grade graduation in the class at Clark Park. Being involved in both Roosevelt and high school theater productions, I have witnessed Mr. DeFabio's work ethic. He always has a smile on his face, and when I thanked him for all the hard work he does, he said to me, "I love what I do." I told
Thank
him
you.
it shows. Please give me 30 extra seconds.
You can finish your sentence.
These are the people that you don't want to lose. These are the people that make the Westfield School District as good as it is. I'm imploring you to continue to talk about these two amazing individuals. They are the epitome of goodness and light for our children. They are necessary. They are loved. If there is any way that you could hold on to them in their current positions due to retirements, etc., please do so.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson.
Hi, Anthony Scaglio on 543 Washington Street. First of all, I'm also want to talk about the sports complexes, but we keep referring to this as the Edison Sports Complex. It's not just Edison. It's also the Memorial Field that's going to be ripped up, and we're going to have plastic grass there. And it's also Elm Street, all Board of Ed properties that are of concern. So it's not just Edison Field. I just wanted to make that clear. So cell towers. If they were going to put a cell tower near a school, what would all the parents be concerned about? Well, mostly that they're ugly, but you always hear about the health concerns, electromagnetic waves, okay? And that's why there's studies that show that there's health issues with that, and parents are always against it. Then you got these 69 kilovolt poles that PSE&G wants to put down South Avenue. And we have a mayor and a council person who wrote a letter to the public that specifically said they had, and to quote, they had concerns, but they weren't just concerns. Where did I write it? They were extreme concerns. So they're concerned about the health of the citizens and these high voltage lines. And they're ugly too, but they're concerned about the health. And there's studies that show that there could be issues with respect to the health. But then we get to turf fields. All of a sudden, those studies don't matter. We have PhD chemical engineers and chemists presenting information about the chemicals and stuff that is involved with this, and the fact that it's not recyclable. And for some reason, those don't seem to be concerns of the town council. Only you can stop this from happening because it's Board of Ed fields. So does the Board of Ed consider this an environmentally acceptable solution, considering what your curriculum has with respect to the environment? And has the Board of Ed thought about the legal risks if the homes behind this field get flooded because that creek overflows? Somebody's going to have to pay for that. It happened in West Orange with, I think it's Seton Hall Prep, where the whole hill caved in because there was so much flooding from the water running off of the artificial turf. That's another thing you got to worry about. So the Board of Ed promised to be a good neighbor. Residents are fine with school activities in the day, but destroying the nighttime quality of life is not
30 seconds.
Being a good neighbor for two private sports organizations. And then you just talked about the town. It's a nice idea to put the budget back into the hands of the taxpayers. Why are we now bypassing the taxpayers for a sports complex? The town has come up with a scheme that bypasses the taxpayers because the taxpayers have voted this down in the past. They don't want lighted fields in residential neighborhoods.
Thank you.
You know, you guys talk for 2 hours and we listened and we get 3 minutes? This is crazy.
Good evening. My name is Jean Lemberg. I live at 528 Grove Street. Last month, Earth Day was celebrated throughout the town of Westfield and at each of the schools. And according to the school district website, a tradition of environmental stewardship remains constant in the Westfield Public Schools community on Earth Day and year-round. Green Team and other student clubs raise awareness about the environment, while students and staff participate in recycling initiatives. There are water bottle refilling stations at each of the district's 10 schools, and across the district, school gardens provide important learning opportunities. The New Jersey Department of Education adopted student learning standards that go into effect in September of this year. They represent a foundation which districts will build coherent curriculum and instruction that prepares each New Jersey student with the knowledge and skills to succeed in our rapidly changing world by including climate change across all content areas, providing opportunities to develop a deep understanding of the science behind the changes and to explore the solutions our world desperately needs. The Westfield curriculum already includes units on Earth systems, weather, pollution control, and other aspects of earth and environmental sciences. Art teachers, like myself, design lessons that encourage students to create artwork using materials that would normally be discarded. Social studies students are asked to think critically by answering essential questions such as, how can people be responsible citizens in taking care of our environment? How does society make responsible decisions about how to use the world's limited resources? I believe that if Mayor Brindle had instructed the Recreation Commission to consider these same essential questions, they would not be asking you to allow them to replace 6 acres of natural grass fields at Edison Intermediate School with 250,000 square feet of artificial turf, which contains plastic carpeting and other components derived from fossil fuels. Instead, they would have presented you with a plan to upgrade EIS and all the school athletic fields with organically maintained natural grass athletic fields with proper grading, drainage, and grass varieties meant for sports activities. Organically maintained grass athletic fields are the healthiest and safest surfaces for our children and our planet. You have to consider that. It's your responsibility to make sure that the plastic carpeting and ground-up tires are not installed at EIS. You're responsible for the children's health. I just hope you'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lindberg.
Hi, Liz Mahalan, 729 Harding Street. Hope you're all well. Thank you so much for all you do. I was just coming here because I understood that you were talking about cap law and trying to get the state legislature to change that. I just wanted to make you aware of some issues that have already come up. Twice there was a request for cap law change. Once was when S2 was created, which is the new funding law. It was vetoed or turned down by the governor, and the legislature would not take it on. Sweeney was requesting that. He was the Senate president at the time, so that gives you a pretty good idea of the difficulty of getting that passed in the legislature. But I digress. They did do an override because when they switched over to S2 from SFRA, a lot of districts lost tens of millions of dollars and they were decimated. And they were stuck with the 2% cap loss. So there were roughly, I'm going off the top of my head, I want to say somewhere around 90 districts that were allowed to supersede the 2% cap. Because they were so decimated and it was horrible. They were losing hundreds of teachers a year, 200 teachers at a time. So they were allowed to exceed cap law. And what we're finding, I work with Save Our Schools as an advocate for public schools. What we're finding is that the leaner the district, the faster they're going down because there's nowhere else to cut. The S2 is really stopping districts from being able to tap resources that are widely available to them. It's not a matter that the town doesn't have the resources, it's that the district literally is not allowed to ask for more resources. And that is problematic. I do suggest, though, that when we are discussing going to the April elections, which you will need unless you want to have even more cuts next year, that we have an honest discussion about this. Just to maintain what we have this year would have required a 5% increase. To maintain. That is not to grow a kindergarten program. That is not to deal with the 3% increases that we're contractually obligated to, or the 6% inflation rates, or the contracts with private entities who have absolutely no cap on what they can charge, including transportation, which, as we know, is harming many districts, as are outplacement private school costs. So these are issues that I think we have to have an honest discussion about. It's not going to be 100,000. It's not going to be $1 million. It's going to be a substantial increase. And then you can reset your base thereafter. So you want to reset your base for a year and then go back to 2%, but you have to get to a realistic base. Unfortunately, we're too lean. We don't have the flexibility that many of the other districts do. So I want to thank you again for your fiscal responsibility and your forward thinking, and I do hope we have a lot more conversations on this. So thank you.
James, hi, 2 Normandy Drive. I'm a buddy of Anthony's. He ran out of time. He asked me to just read, I guess, 10 seconds of concluding statements here in his notes. 7 acres in the back of Tamacas Park is the way to do this. We urge you to have an open mind and think about it. The second point he wants to raise is equitability. Why could and why will Roosevelt Intermediate School get to have grass and trees during recess and physical ed, and Edison students have to put up with fake grass that gets really hot and it's carcinogenic, and there are endocrine disruptors? I am a chemical engineer, and I used to make those rubbers. I had no idea that those rubbers are going to go to garbage dumps, such as artificial turf. It's a sin. I hope you think about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I wasn't sure I was going to come up here and talk. I'm so nervous. My heart's been beating for like the past hour I've been here. So just, forgive my, hopefully I'll make sense.
Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Aya Kelani, and I live at 525 Central Avenue. I'm a proud mom of 2 boys at Tamacas School, 1st grade and 5th grade. You know where this is going. First, I'd like to say Happy May, and I would like to say Eid Mubarak to whoever celebrates. Happy Eid, and it's also Mental Health Awareness Month this month, so I wanted to mention that as well. And I'm here in support of the kids and teachers, in a more general view, but also specifically to the kids, the children and teachers at Tamacas School. I speak for the kids, I speak for the teachers. I know that I know that your hands are tied, and I know that you've already made your decisions, and, I'm probably not here to make any, change anybody's mind. I am hoping for a Eid miracle, but what I did want to say was that the past 5 years at Tamacas School have been amazing, and I so appreciate the Westfield School District and everything that it's done for me, for my kids, for our family. We used to live in Saudi Arabia, so this is we came here 5 years ago. It's just been such an amazing, refreshing, improvement, obviously. I wanted to give my kids this kind of life. I grew up between Philadelphia, and Saudi Arabia. Anyway, speaking of Tamacas Elementary, and I'm going to say it, Mr. Ben Norkus. He is not just the school music teacher. He's been so much more than that for my kids, personally speaking, and for all the kids at the school. I just want to say that a lot of hearts are broken, and I know that, not everybody can be happy. I know that it's a big loss for us and for the kids. It's a big loss for him and for the teachers and his Tamacas family, which is the kids and the teachers and how much, like how strong that unit is, and losing him is gonna, it's just another huge loss after everything that we've been going through, the kids and teachers have gone through the past few years, with everything. So this is just another loss, and it just really saddens me. And I'm not here to fight, and I'm not here to say, but this and this and this and that. I don't know. I mean, we love him, and we know that he's going to be, he's going to thrive wherever he is, and we hope the same for our kids. But Mr. Norkus and the kids and the teachers, thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
I just want to say Eid Mubarak. Thank you for mentioning that.
Sorry. I ask the board to approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, including harassment, intimidation, and bullying incidents. And be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of that discussion will be made public as soon as practical. Can I have a second? Thank you. Layla? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstention? All right, we are in private session. We will not be returning to public tonight. Thank you all for joining us this evening.